For decades, schools relied on a simple strategy for handling diversity: take students with physical or intellectual disabilities and drop them directly into mainstream classrooms. Yet the expected academic and social improvements routinely fail to materialize. We call this practice integration. The defining characteristic of integration is its demand on the student. The learner is responsible for adapting to a rigid, pre-existing educational system never designed for them. To see exactly why this fails, we map out the baseline states in this set theory animation. Historically, schools defaulted to outright exclusion, leaving marginalized students outside, or strict segregation, grouping them in isolated environments. When policies shifted to integration, the visual changed to this. The diverse learners are placed inside the main environment, but they remain isolated. Now look at the target model, inclusion. The nodes disperse and actively connect across the entire network. Conceptually, inclusion flips the burden of adaptation. It requires the educational system itself to adapt its structures, curricula, and methodologies to fit a diverse learner profile. True inclusion is a departure from passive seating arrangements. It is an active, multidimensional engineering process. Achieving this state requires replacing legacy systems with specific legal, pedagogical, and social frameworks. Before India's independence, education for children with disabilities operated on a segregated, charity-based model, driven primarily by non-governmental organizations. By the 1970s and 1980s, government policies like the Integrated Education for Disabled Children scheme began pushing to place these students into regular schools, taking the first steps toward a unified system. In 1995, the Persons with Disabilities Act established an initial legal framework. However, it recognized only 7 categories of disability and favored integration over inclusion. That framework eventually fractured under grassroots advocacy, leading to the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act of 2016. The 2016 Act expanded legal recognition from 7 to 21 categories, protecting neurological conditions, blood disorders, and learning disabilities like dyslexia. Embedded here is Section 16, outlining institutional mandates, including a 5% reservation and zero rejection policy. Zero rejection dictates that no educational institution can deny admission based on background or disability. The law also enforces operational compliance. Schools must provide barrier-free infrastructure, providing curriculum adaptations and specific examination supports, like extra time or scribes. The National Education Policy of 2020 cemented these rules further, prioritizing the integration of assistive technologies to push schools toward a mainstreaming approach. Post-2016, India's legal code classifies inclusive education as an enforceable fundamental right. Macro-level policy remains abstract until a school determines what adjustments a specific student needs. Here, children with special needs are categorized by their requirement for a modified learning environment. The diagnostic pathway starts with screening, a process of continuous classroom observation to spot students who are struggling in localized areas. If screening indicates a bottleneck, a diagnostic assessment follows. Teams use standardized clinical tools to determine the precise nature of the cognitive, physical, or social friction. This data pipeline culminates in educational profiling, mapped out in an individualized education program, or IEP. As shown in this flow diagram, the IEP acts as a direct blueprint for classroom support strategies. This identification process generates the schematic needed to adapt the classroom system to the student.
To apply that IEP blueprint, we have to strip away traditional classroom assumptions and rebuild the learning space from first principles. This isometric wireframe represents the first foundational layer, the physical dimension. Baseline physical compliance requires barrier-free accessibility. Ramps, tactile pathways, and modular seating are built directly into the floor plan. With the physical space secured, we introduce the second layer, the pedagogical dimension. The core engine driving this dimension is Universal Design for Learning, or UDL. UDL requires lessons to be designed for accessibility from the start. Content is delivered through differentiated instruction, utilizing visual media, kinesthetic activities, and assistive technologies like text-to-speech software. Finally, we layer in the third layer, the social dimension. Notice how the nodes cluster. By designing structured, cooperative activities and peer-mediated learning tasks, the system breaks down homogeneous social bubbles. Constant exposure to diverse cognitive and physical needs normalizes differences, dismantling biases that lead to isolation. Social friction in this environment becomes a distinct pedagogical opportunity to teach empathy and self-advocacy in real time. A legally compliant classroom operates across all three dimensions: physical, pedagogical, and social simultaneously. Failing to maintain support in one causes the entire inclusive architecture to fail. The most engineered physical and pedagogical architecture is useless without the correct human operator. The primary obstacle is the legacy definition of the teacher as a transmitter of knowledge. Operating an inclusive classroom demands an upgrade, redefining the educator as a facilitator of diverse learning. This prioritizes equity over equality, ensuring each student receives the exact individualized support they need to succeed. This includes the ethical belief of collective responsibility. The inclusive educator rejects the idea that children with disabilities are solely the concern of special educators. To build this mindset, teacher training programs now mandate specialized modules in pre-service degrees, alongside continuous peer learning circles to manage the challenges of diverse learner profiles. True inclusion requires an educator to treat student diversity as a baseline classroom resource. Even with an upgraded facilitator, an inclusive classroom cannot survive in isolation. It requires an external triangle of support to maintain a sustainable ecosystem. The first point relies on school management and specialized resource teachers who visit mainstream schools to provide itinerant support and co-planning strategies to general educators. The second point is the Parent-Teacher Association. In an inclusive setting, the PTA acts as a collaborative partner in developing the IEP and mobilizing community advocacy. The third point relies on macro-level government interventions, most notably the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, or SSA. Launched in 2001, the SSA operationalized the zero rejection policy. It deployed dedicated funds for barrier-free infrastructure, established block-level camps to identify children with special needs, and provided home-based bridging mechanisms. We return to the core distinction between integration and inclusion. Integration demands the student fit the system. Inclusion demands the system adapt to the student. Inclusive education is not a specialized subgenre of teaching. When an educational system is engineered to support its margins, it inherently improves the academic and holistic outcomes for every student within it.